Tonight's topic is going to be presented just as we've done with all of our other videos, which is an introduction into the topic and then a guided visualization to use the topic to resource yourselves. Each resourcing session is on one of the central pillars of systemic constellations. And as I've said, it's a presentation of how that might be useful and then an idea of how you might use it in your own life. We've got several sessions on our YouTube channel. Kate can send information about that. We've got videos that don't run in any particular order, but they all support each other. So we've got one on agreeing and acceptance. We've got one on belonging and inclusion. We've got one in order and place. Another one on the balance of exchange. And then this evening's one is about entanglements, which I'll explain more fully in a moment, and giving back. We've got a WhatsApp group that I just want to mention in case people aren't part of it. It's just for constellations. It's a constellation community, and it's a place where you can ask anything about the topic. It's also a place where you can put your hand up if you want to actually receive a constellation. So these sessions really have come out of me wanting to pull together all of the things that I think are the most important elements of systemic constellations. So I use all of the teachings that I receive from the Centre of Systemic Constellations, my ongoing supervision that is with them as well, my own experiences a lot of the time from my own work, themes that come up in the constellations that we do for the community, and then my favourite writers, the people that I kind of come back to time and time again to kind of get more insight. Because constellations is just it's a technique and a tool that you just kind of learn more and more and more about as you do it. So we always say you can watch these videos whether you know lots about constellations and you've done it loads of times and you maybe even constellate yourself, or you know nothing. They're designed to just basically support wherever anybody is on that spectrum. So getting into tonight's topic, as I said, it is a phenomena that is that we find in constellating, that the constellation techniques calls entanglement. And as you learn more about it, it might be something that you have come across in other technique and by another name. But I'm going to explain it through the teachings of constellations. But the thing about entanglements is that there are probably lots of active entanglements for all of us all the time. It kind of is a part of being part of a system. It kind of is how we are part of systems. But what we're looking for is where any form of entanglement is limiting or potentially creating an interaction with life that is no longer helpful or healthy for you. And at that point, we're trying to figure out if there's something that needs to be given back to somebody else within your family system. So it can be associated with identifying something that you need to let go of, or something that you're being burdened by that actually isn't a part of the life that you're living. The videos that we've done so far have all focused on the key principles of what constitutes a healthy system. So we always come back to that at the beginning. What we're looking at is when we take the teachings of Bert Hellinger, who is the founder of Family Constellations, and all of the other amazing teachers that have come since then, we're looking at what are the key elements that make up a family system, and how do we attempt to adhere to those or realign ourselves with those. So the videos so far have focused on all of these key elements. The first being acceptance that we were saying before, and that's a key pillar of constellations. Belonging, making sure that every member of every family and every element of their circumstances is allowed. Order, making sure that people are in their right place and that the elders come before the youngers, etc. Exchange, where we're making sure that there's some kind of balance between what we give and get, and that those that are in the position of giving, like parents, are giving to those who are in the position of receiving, which is children. And then this evening, I want to introduce the idea of fate. So fate, when it is used as a term in constellations, is that every family member has their own fate. And importantly, it is only them that can carry it. No matter how excruciating that might seem, and no matter how much we might want that not to be the case. And we'll come back to that. So an entanglement can occur in family systems when these orders or these principles of a healthy system are somehow out. So rather than everything and everyone belonging, we have the opposite of that, and we have exclusion. And the element of exclusion can result in some kind of entanglement in another generation. So imagine if something is not allowed to belong, somebody's not allowed to belong, then there's a kind of echo of that disruption that kind of moves down the generations. If we look at the idea that everything has its place and everything had its order, if we've got people in the wrong roles or the wrong place in a family system, again, that can echo down the generations, and it can be a disruption further along. If we've got people who are not allowed or are not taking on their own fate, then we might have burdens or symptoms that echo down the generations. Now, in some ways, you can see it moving down the generations in a kind of linear fashion. And in some ways, you can see that it's so severe that it kind of pinballs around a family system, looking for some opportunity to be included or to be seen or to find its owner again. And that can mean that there are symptoms or challenges or burdens that are pinning themselves to different family members because they were never allowed in the right place. So, as I said, essential learning is that we cannot carry what is not ours. We cannot atone for what was not ours. Sometimes entanglements in family systems are completely, or at least maybe initially, unconscious. And that can obviously make it quite hard for individuals to identify them in the first place. Even harder for that individual to transform it or let it go. And that is one of the reasons why using family constellations and using constellations in a group setting and using other people to represent elements of your family system can really help illuminate these potential entanglements. So we're talking about an entanglement occurring when something in a family system needs to be seen or included or felt or allowed or heard or acknowledged or known or put in the right order, and it hasn't happened before, and therefore it is causing disruption. So one of my favourite authors is this guy, Berthold Ulsamer. This is an absolutely fabulous book on constellation. I use it for all of these videos. So he says, every family history points to some members or emotions or truths or behaviours that have been excluded. Others have reluctant or unable members that take on their own actions. The other members of the family may seem to ignore it, but it just doesn't evaporate into thin air. The family system as a whole, or the consciousness of the family system, some people call it, or the soul of the family system, other people call it. But that family system has a thirst to restore good order, which is kind of, or is out of control of the individual. So the family system is so important for life to continue life, that it has a consciousness of its own that will sometimes surpass the needs of the individual. And out of this consciousness, the family system will basically create a substitute order in order to keep itself flowing and for life to continue. And then the imbalance is basically addressed by a later generation. Maybe when there is insufficient, well, maybe when that family system has got sufficient capacity to deal with it. So it's not something to be criticized or concerned about. Really, when you identify these patterns that have kind of moved down a few generations and are now causing people trouble in this lifetime, really the thing to remember is that the reason it was pushed down is because it was the only way that family system at that time could cope. And it needed to cope in order for life to continue. And that was the only important thing for that family system, for life to continue. And now, a few generations later, this thing that has been bubbling along that just couldn't be coped with, couldn't be looked at, couldn't be included, couldn't be allowed to be reality. Now it can be included because we found a generation that have capacity. Now, sometimes it doesn't feel like that generation has capacity. Sometimes, certainly the people that comes to constellations don't feel like they have the capacity to hold that. And what we believe as constellators is that life only gives us what we can cope with. Although we also know that coping with can be extreme. So as a practitioner, I've seen this demonstrated to individuals time and time again. I know there'll be people watching this video who have been part of those constellations where we have illuminated something that brings so much relief to that person because they just suddenly realize that it isn't theirs. And they get this sudden awareness that they knew it wasn't theirs. Like they just, the heaviness or the burden or the depression or the anxiety or the concern or the sorrow or the lack of luck or lack of joy or they just knew that part of that didn't belong to them. And when we identify that it might be an echo from another generation, it just gives them so much hope and possibility that really makes sense. And in a moment, I'll share a personal example from my own work with my own supervisor that just really was that absolutely coming to life for me. So sometimes we get clients who the way that they interact with life just doesn't make sense to them. Because they'll say, I don't like I don't get it. Everything's fine. Like everything seems fine. I'm not fine. Like I'm not living in a way that everything is fine. Sometimes, as I've said, heaviness, depression, confusion, and that doesn't feel relevant or accurate. Sometimes, and almost always, it is showing up as a slightly distorted version of whatever the family system didn't allow or didn't include. So it's not necessarily directly a repeating pattern. So we have to really kind of keep our mind open and be curious. So for example, somebody who is experiencing chronic fatigue isn't necessarily just feeling the symptoms of chronic fatigue that were belonged to somebody else. What I would be curious about is if there's any relief that we can bring the client who's experiencing chronic fatigue that is due to something in their family system that might be a tragedy that had to be ignored and pushed down and wasn't allowed. Sometimes it is physical symptoms. Sometimes it can be something that somebody's absolutely feeling physically in this lifetime and they don't know where it came from. So we just have to remain open to the possibility. Some constellators really adhere to and are very aware of how symptoms can be linked to repeating evidence of things showing up in family systems. And I would say that decades ago, when Bert Hellinger was maybe bringing this work to the world, it was more likely that people would say, if you have a client who is experiencing addictive behaviors, for example, then we immediately first check whether there has been a absence of a father figure in the family system somewhere. And there would be that would be the first place you would go to. And now we're much broader at having that in the back of our mind as there is a theory around that, but absolutely that's not necessarily going to be the case for this family system. So, for example, some constellators historically would say, if we notice the client is struggling with an eating disorder, then we would be looking are there potential links to previous generations suffering with famine, for example. And I think that's useful, but I think it's certainly not a binary thing. It's like a kind of just adding to the curiosity and adding to the seeing everything with an open mind, understanding that family systems are complex, and always coming back to the fact that what we're trying to do is support the client to understand more about their system and be curious about whether there's things that they don't need to be as connected to. And again, just give people a bit more information and something for them to look into. Another amazing writer on this subject is a Dutch lady called Els van Stein. This is her lovely book. It's called The Fountain, and she uses the idea of a fountain as a family system. And she has many chapters on entanglement. So she describes it as an entanglement, meaning that you've been taken into service by the family consciousness without even noticing it. And you may be entangled or holding something from an earlier generation that for whatever reason has not been acknowledged in the place it occurred. So if you think about it, just as we are, hopefully, surely, incredibly grateful for all the wonderful things that have been passed down to us by our ancestors, life. Yeah, we always return to that notion that in constellations that we wouldn't be alive if they hadn't had the skills and the luck and the circumstances to survive. So we are all ancestors of survivors. There's no other way of looking at it. And obviously we have been passed down all of those things that they needed to survive. We also just need to be curious about things that were passed down that weren't so useful. And some of those things can be, for some people, can be very limiting and terrifying. And it is not uncommon for an entanglement to be identified for people who have suicidal tendencies, that they have an entanglement with a person who died and the death was not acknowledged or was not could not be seen by that family system, and that for some reason that moment that person passed has been tagged onto another person who is very alive and has a huge life to live. So when we come across that example, it's, you know, we really need to attend to it as a community, and that's one of the reasons we do this work. So we're looking for when feelings don't stack up with what you're experiencing. The facts of life don't of your life don't match how you're feeling, and on closer inspection, you are curious about whether that could belong to somebody else. So, as I said, I'm going to just draw quickly on my own example that came up recently, and then we will move into a short exercise that just helps us all kind of repeatedly give back what doesn't belong to us and just stand very, very clearly in our own space with our own energy and our own life ahead of us. And I've shared about this in our WhatsApp group as well, but it's just a really good example that happened recently. When I've been in a position where I've made a decision to leave my current employment, and I was working with my supervisor, and I just couldn't describe, I could not link how I was feeling in relation to just leaving a job. It was completely out of proportion. I was confused. As I was saying to my supervisor, like, I'm overwhelmed. Everything feels completely catastrophic. I'm really struggling to even go on. I'm like, I know that I'm showing signs of depression. I just can't connect to my joy. But I've decided to do this. You know, I've decided that it's the right thing to do. And people are kind of saying, you must feel so relieved. You must be over the moon. Like this is going to be the best thing for you. I was like, do you know, that's nowhere close. No, absolutely bears no resemblance to how I'm feeling. So just in itself, that moment of kind of thinking, this is what's happening in my life, but this is how I feel, and those things are confusing me, was a good reason to go to supervision. And I would encourage people to come to our kind of community constellations if that is a place that they find themselves as well. So for me, that kind of indicates that it might be an entanglement. And so we working with Sheila, my supervisor, and the group that we'd got that day, we basically did some constellating. And many times in the constellation work that I do for myself, the fact that my mum's mum died 6 months after I was born comes up quite a lot, for obvious reasons, really, I guess. That type of challenge of my mum losing her mum just as she had me, and I'm her first child. So she became a mum, she lost her mum. So that type of thing is a kind of likely point of difficulty in a system where there isn't much capacity usually for those people to deal with it, which kind of logically makes sense, right? So as my supervisor asked me about what, if this wasn't yours, where would it sit? Like, if it belonged to somebody else. And we brought in representatives for my mom and my grandma and myself. And immediately when words came out of the constellation, like heartbroken, like hidden grief, I was like, oh my God. Yeah, like they're the words. Like that's the description of what's happening in me. But it's not, I can feel it, and it feels true, and it is true, but it's not related to what has kind of has disrupted it, which is currently this idea, like this choice to leave work. Then I was like able to separate these things out and just feel so much more control and awareness. So this hidden grief that my mum was not able to grieve her mum because she was trying to be the mum of a 6-month-old, and then actually became pregnant with my younger sister as well. So this was like really kicked down the street. Sits in our family system waiting for an opportunity to be allowed, because it needs to be allowed, and it wasn't allowed when there was no space for it, because she had to deal with being a new mum, and because there's a culture in our family of stiff upper lip anyway. So it started to really help me understand that I was doing my best to bring this out and allow it to be true, because somebody had to. It's like I had decided that I was going to allow this trauma to be brought out because my mum couldn't. Now, as I keep saying throughout this video, you can't carry somebody else's fate. You can't fix something for somebody else. So just realizing that I was trying to do something that's not possible immediately helped me realize that I understood why I was doing it, but I also knew that it wasn't going to work. I also realized that there was a kind of link between me feeling at work that I was angry that I had followed the rules and I'd done everything that I could and it hadn't worked out like I wanted it to. Suddenly I realized that my mum was in that position too. In her family system, she was the youngest of three. It was the thing to have children. She'd followed the rules. When it was her time, she'd had this daughter. And then her mum died. And that idea of, I think this is what I was supposed to do, but it wasn't supposed to work out like this. So suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I get this. I get why a truth of what's happening at work, which really doesn't need to be that difficult and upsetting, is getting morphed into my mum's feelings that were definitely worth being upset about. So then I'm like, okay, so I'm kind of, I hope this example is trying to help kind of people feel what the word entanglement means. It's like when you get this idea that there's too much of you that is invested in this experience that you're having in your life because there's an echo that belongs to somebody else. So yeah, it would be normal to be a little bit sad about leaving a job where I wish it had turned out differently. That's fine, but not to be crippled with absolute grief. And that, the cripple with grief, belongs to somebody else. So I can just let go of that bit and then keep my slight sadness that it didn't work out. And then everybody's got their fate and their reality. The other thing too that we use a lot in constellations is rituals, as a lot of you will know. And so when I understood that, after I'd finished the constellation and I'd understood that there was a little bit of an entanglement with me and my mom and my grandma and everything that happened, I actually went to visit my grandma's grave, which is literally like 2 minutes from my house, and just went there to remember that she died and my mum lived and I lived and we're alive and she's dead. And that kind of sounds simple, but constellating really reminds us that we need to do that we need to go, oh, I'm alive and I'm young and I've got loads to do, and I'm like, I need to be in my life because, thank you grandma, but that's where you are now. And then I found a lovely old photo that basically had got my mum as a tiny girl and my grandma and my great grandma all sitting on a bench. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's remember great grandma, mum, and me. And it's just these little things that you can do on your own in your own space without having to constellate, that just realign everything and give everything back to everybody. Because the last thing that I want to be doing is basically hanging out in a space where my mum didn't grieve and my grandma was lost and everyone was a bit disrupted, and that happened when I was very, very tiny. It's like, that's not my, that's done, that's gone, that belongs to other people, and there's sadness associated with that, but it doesn't need to be my sadness. So remember that we do this work because we're looking for things that might be troubling or limiting. We're not saying that that we need to identify all of our entanglements. There'll be loads of those floating around doing us loads of good all the time. This is really just about using some of these techniques, using the community, using these exercises when we think this just doesn't feel right. Something's not quite in the right place. It's and that, yeah. So it's really attending to those things that are limiting our expression of life. Lots of our patterns make completely good sense, right? They've served us really well. They've been passed down through generations, and they are the way we are, and they are bringing huge amounts of joy and possibility into our life. It's just the stuff that is holding us back. And I think Vanessa Masson-Boring, who wrote this book, Family Systems, Constellations, and Other System Constellation Adventures. This one's, again, another lovely one. She basically, I read a quote from her that I've used before and I'd forgotten about it, but she basically says, to feel guilt or anguish over something that can never be changed takes energy. And that's what I was doing, right? That's what I was subconsciously doing a few weeks ago. However, to honor the difficult fate of people throughout history, and to acknowledge that there were multiple forces at work bigger than our own energy, gives us energy. So really, that's what the practice is about. It's about asking what serves my life, what am I responsible for, and what can I change, and then what is beyond my ability. And also, who am I to judge those who lived in another lifetime, in another context, compelled by the pressures of their family consciousness at that time? Where am I limiting myself through my loyalty to group consciousness? Does my pain or my self-sabotage or my anger, sorrow, edges of madness and fear come from a place in my family that preceded my life, and therefore who has to be honoured? So just that last bit again. Does my pain, my self-sabotage, my anger, my sorrow, my edges of madness and fear come from a place in my family that preceded my life? If so, who has to be honoured? So I'm very aware there's a lot in that, and entanglements are one of the more subtle elements of constellations that are like take a little bit longer to maybe get your head around. So brilliant that this is recorded and you can go back and listen to it again, or pull out bits that are useful, or bits that don't make sense, and you can ask us questions on them. But I'm going to leave it there and then guide us into an exercise now. And as always, you can, do the exercise now, or pause and come back to it, or just have a listen to it and see what you think, and then do it another time. But this is a visualization, so just take a moment to connect to how your body feels. You've been doing a lot of listening and a lot of intellectual processing. So now it's just time to switch and come into connection with your body. And you might want to just close your eyes and maybe just become aware of your breath. And how the breath is moving the collarbones, the top of your body. And how the breath is moving your ribs out and in as you breathe. and how your breath is moving your belly up and down. And as you turn your focus inwards, just noticing how your body is doing right now. Just softening, calming. Letting the mind wander off. And as you come into that calmer, more relaxed space, in your mind's eye, imagine that you're standing in the center of a large, circular, warmly lit space. It might be inside or it might be outside, but it's safe and it's comfortable, and you're happy to be there. And it's your space and you control everything that happens in it. And in front of you, in this space, is your family system. And they might be far away and they might be close, but wherever they are, it's where you choose them to be in this moment. And you can see at the front is your mum and your dad. Whether you knew them or not, the mum and dad that created you. And by their sides, there are any other parents that you might have had. All of our systems are different. This is your family system. And behind those people that brought you into the world and the people that cared for you, behind them are their parents. And this family system, just like all family systems, fans out like the tail feathers of a peacock, because behind every person are their parents. And this goes back and back and back as far as the eye can see. And pretty soon it's far too much to take in every face. And there's thousands of faces that you've never seen, but they're all there. So from where you're standing in your safe, comfortable space, with your family system fanning out in front of you, just exactly at the right distance from you, so that you can feel comfortable with where it is. Just take it in. The reality of your existence. Whether it was like that in real life or not, doesn't matter. This is just a map of the systemic truth of your lineage. Whether you knew those people, whether they were there for you or not. It is the systemic truth of your family system. And now in your mind's eye, I want you to invite you to just stand on something that allows you a bit more height so that you can see a bit further. Maybe it's a little stage, maybe it's a tree stump, maybe it's a big hill, maybe it's a wonderful cliff that looks out over this family system. It's your space. You know how you need to just step a little higher, to see further, and to take it all in. And from this place, you can speak out across that family system and they can all hear you in a magical way. You can speak to these thousands of people that contributed to your existence. And I want you to imagine that you're saying to your family system, I exist because you survived. And that doesn't even have to be in a loud voice, because they are your family system. However you want to deliver that message, they can hear you. And you can say to them, I have you all in my DNA. I want you to imagine saying, I thank you for all you gave me. It was just what I needed to be the true version of myself. I can't possibly know everything that you've given me. And yet I am truly grateful. And now as you look over that vast collection of people that are the reason that you are alive, I want you to imagine saying to them, I feel it if one of you is not included. I feel guilt that can't be felt by you. I feel the pain that some of you couldn't stand. Some of this stuff has really stuck with me and feels like stones in my backpack, and I'm here to gently put that down now. Now that I have the capacity to see this, I'm here to give it back with gratitude and with understanding. And now in your mind's eye, I want you to imagine that you've got a backpack or a big basket, or maybe it's a barrow, or maybe it's a sack, but it's got stuff in it that you've realized no longer serves you. And whatever form it takes, only you know that. But this is the opportunity to gently and confidently send those things back, the items back to your family that make your family system more complete. We do this as an act of love for our family system, honouring that everything needs to be in the right place and not with us. So just see how those items are sent back to your family system. Maybe it's pebbles that roll down the hill back to whoever they belong to, or maybe it's birds that are freed from a cage that go and land on the shoulder of whoever they belong to, or butterflies that leave your space and go back to the family system space. Whatever it is in this moment, just allow that to happen. Whatever is not to stay with you goes back to whoever it belongs to. We don't even need to know who that is or what that was, because it's true for all of us. We just, with love, gratitude, we just take this moment to give back what is not ours. Take the time that you need to take every one of those items and release it and free it and give it back. And notice how easy that is and how those items want to go back. They always wanted to go back. Now that they've been honoured, now that they've been included, now that they've been seen, because of your capacity to do so, you free them to move back to where they belong. Just as it was always supposed to be. Every family member owning their own fate, you owning your own fate. And when the ritual is complete, you look over your family system again and you notice how you feel lighter, more capacious, more resourced, softer. And you ask that they look on you with blessings. Imagine saying those words to your family system. Look upon me with blessings as I bow and turn. Just imagine yourself bowing to your beautiful family system that brought you into this world and turning so that they are behind you. And with your final words, you can say, I turn and leave this with you so I can be free to live my own life. I turn and leave this with you so I can be free to live my own life. And as you have your back to your family system, be assured that they want nothing more than you to be free and live your life. That is what they always intended. Feel them behind you, supporting you, resourcing you. Everybody in their right place, in their right size, in their right order, carrying their own fate. Giving you their blessings to live your life just as you wish, on behalf of nobody else. And shortly we're going to come out of this exercise, so just before you do, gather in all of the goodness from this experience and leave everything else. Feel the power of your system, your family system behind you, and the opening of your heart and your energy and your possibility that you've created tonight by giving back what was not yours. Now in your own time, and there's absolutely no rush at all, but just start to come out of this exercise by bringing a bit of movement to your fingers and your toes, and having a little wriggle around, and maybe a few shoulder rolls and a few deeper breaths and a few head rolls, whatever you need to do to just come back out of that space and into full awareness. And as always, after these exercises that we offer in these videos, we say that a lot could have shifted, that this work is quite powerful. We suggest people spend a bit of time observing how they feel, noticing, maybe journaling, and also just allowing the system to do its thing. So sometimes it's very simple and things just become lighter. As always, we say, if this work raises questions or concerns or wonderings or curiosities that you want to share with the community, then you've got our details. You can always go to us directly, and you can also use the community WhatsApp group. And just to remind people to be very kind to themselves, to not try to figure everything out and fix everything, but to just allow dust to settle and new possibilities